Like a lot of people, I wasn't going to watch The Mandalorian, but then I heard it was actually good and different, so I watched it, and it was okay. And then, like a lot of people, I heard about The Mandalorian Season 2 and all the epic cameos, and Ahsoka Tano's there, and Luke Skywalker's lightsaber, R2-D2, and Boba Fett's back, and I thought, yeah, fuck that. So, like a lot of people, I wasn't going to watch the Book of Boba Fett. But then I thought, oh, there might be some views in it. Spoilers for a bit, I guess, but not really. I haven't seen the finale yet. It's not out when I'm filming this, so I can't spoil all the Rancor riding, Baby Yoda's back, dumb fight, spin-off show bait, epic cameos that they shove in there. I can't spoil that stuff. Now, the biggest problem with the Book of Boba Fett is that it shouldn't exist. Boba Fett was a costume and then a punchline. It was embarrassing that he was ever more than that. It was one of the things that made it like, when Disney was getting rid of all the old canon, that was one of the things where I was like, well, at least they're getting rid of that stuff. And now they're just doing it again. It seems to be a running theme. They've abandoned all of the old canon just to repeat all of its mistakes. So the show has a lot of work to do to justify its existence. And I think they know that, they realize that, and they spend a lot of time working on that. And because they spend so much time on that, they almost get it there. They don't really get any further than that. It isn't like actually good at any point, but at least to start with, it is kind of okay. It really has little to offer other than digging up things from the past that used to be good once. On the plus side, Boba Fett sucks. He's not very cool, he's not powerful, he's just some fucking guy. The best parts of the show are just him eating shit.
Get me to the better part.
They throw out whatever character he used to be and instead go for this friendly neighborhood crime lord, which is bizarre and stupid, but it does kind of have a charm to it. I only wish they'd actually, committed to it. It does feel like they still want him to be this cool character, but he isn't. And broadly, I like the flashbacks to him getting out of the Sarlacc stuff. It's so unnecessary and so stupid. But it does seem like a more interesting story than the show itself. I like the work that they're doing with the Tuskens, sort of rehabilitating the Tusken Raiders, which is a bit of fun. Maybe, I don't know, a little misguided. It feels kind of weird for them to be going, the Tusken Raiders are now the rightful indigenous people of Tatooine, but also they're savages. I don't know, it feels a little misguided. Now, The Mandalorian Season 1 was pretty good. It was, a bit experimental. Not incredibly experimental, but just for Star Wars, it was a tiny bit different. And it exists in this dead area of the Star Wars canon, so they could kind of tell their own story without being bogged down by references. And it was more inspired by George Lucas's inspirations than it was by, the nostalgic memory of Star Wars. And it's basically just a Boba Fett show, but they've very cleverly made it a new character, so they can actually have character with character development without any of the baggage of Boba Fett. So I suppose, unsurprisingly, the Boba Fett show goes back on everything that worked about that. It looks cheap. I remember one of the things that was impressive about The Mandalorian was how good it looked. But this looks like cheap TV. Plastic costumes, pristine sets, cheesy grading, a fully digital Baby Yoda. Sometimes it looks nice. I am very fond of the way that computers these days can do global illumination. It's really incredible what computers can do these days. But eventually they just give up on trying to do a Boba Fett show and just do tie-ins for all their other shit. In both an admission that this show shouldn't exist and an obvious promotion of their other content, they just start doing The Mandalorian instead. And they take the digging up of the past to never before seen heights. The few new ideas that they do have only exist to get blown up by the return of the old. Now, the reason this show exists, as I'm sure we all realize, is because Boba Fett is bankable IP, which is more important than ever because of streaming. Now, the streaming business model is a subset of the dominance business model, which is particularly popular in tech right now. We don't have a ton of time to get into this. It's a pretty broad topic to cover, but basically, the goal for the tech companies is not to make money. It's to dominate a space by hemorrhaging money. scooping up all of the users until you're the last man standing. The less financially viable your business model is, the better. The more money you lose, the less anyone can compete with you. And then they think they'll lower their costs, jack up the prices, and because the users will have nowhere else left to go, they'll make super profits. And these people are fucking morons. So Netflix is obviously the first of the streaming companies, and to establish themselves, they've accumulated $16 billion in debt. The goal isn't to profit off the content, it's to accumulate users quicker than the competition and generate shareholder value, which is interesting for a media company, because it means they're not in the business of trying to make successful media. They're in the business of selling platform subscriptions. The content is no longer the product, it's a marketing expense for the platform. And they don't make any downstream profits off it, there's no re-release, no physical media, no licensing down the line. So every release is like just a one and done marketing campaign. They just need to make non-subscribers think that they should subscribe and keep their subscribers subscribed. And that maybe doesn't sound like a huge difference from just selling media product, it's just one step removed, right? But it does put them in the bizarre situation where announcing a lineup of shows is actually more important than releasing any of those shows. When the goal is to make people not unsubscribe, it's more important to have the name Boba Fett on their little upcoming shows graphic than it is for anyone to actually watch it. As if Rangers of the Republic is an actual thing that will ever exist.
These interconnected shows, along with the future stories, will excite new audiences, embrace our most passionate fans, and will culminate in a climactic story event.
I love climactic story events. That's my favorite. Imagine if they just made something good. Now, it's maybe a little unfair of me to frame every creative decision on this show as so calculated and jaded, but every creative decision on Disney's Star Wars comes into question because there's a group of like 10 to 20 executives, presidents, brand managers, and producers called the Lucasfilm Story Group, who oversee every creative decision made on every Star Wars product and ensure that it is canonical, but also, far more crucially, ensure that it aligns with their brand values and corporate strategy. And that's obviously their real job. This is a group of executives, not Star Wars fans. So any bit of Star Wars content getting made right now will be interfered with by this team of executives. It's maybe not that different to how all the Marvel writers go through the Marvel training process to learn the brand values and produce cookie-cutter scripts that match executive desire. But the one key difference is that they're waiting for the content to be underway and then interfering with it. So everything that comes out of the Disney Star Wars umbrella is interfered with, and it shows, I think. So The Mandalorian was different, right? It was very much an experiment. Two of Disney's more important creatives pitched it as trying to do something different, not touching any existing characters. You know, they'll do it on the cheap, and they sold everyone on that vision. You know, not that cheap. I'm just saying, you know, cheaper than... Anyway, everyone committed to making that show, the show that they wanted to make, and they weren't necessarily upholding the Star Wars brand, but it worked. And then because it worked, it became something of interest, something that they had to make represent the Star Wars brand, an area of focus for all of this executive desire. And now that brings us to the Book of Boba Fett, which is just so tacky and tired, which is very, very much in line with the Disney Star Wars core brand values. So, you know, don't enjoy anything. It'll only let you down. Now, when the goal is just platform subscriptions, the content doesn't necessarily have to be marketed positively, right? They just need to market to people who aren't looking at traditional adverts, maybe aren't looking at any adverts. They basically just need to get people talking on social media. Recently, the live-action Cowboy Bebop, most of their marketing material seem to be just clips of the worst stuff you've ever seen. Or like Eternals, which the marketing material would have you believe takes place entirely on this beige beach. And that was happening at a time where a very popular post to do was complaining about how bland Marvel movies look. The movie doesn't look like that. I scrubbed through and there's a lot of colors in that movie. But the marketing materials would have you believe it looked like art. And this is not the way to promote content that you want people to watch, right? Just making it look bad. But intentional or not, it is a way of getting people talking about your stuff who would otherwise be completely disinterested. And at this point, that's all Star Wars has. I only ever hear about Star Wars when there's some important controversy around it. It's insane that The Last Jedi is still this big culture war touchstone that's dug up and relitigated every 2 months forever. For such a middling nothing movie, that is incredible spin by Disney. I wasn't going to do that last bit. I had that cut out of the video, but then last night, The Last Jedi was trending on Twitter, so that's back in. I think there were, what, 4 girls in that movie? Pretty controversial stuff. But that's doing double duty, right? It's getting people talking, but then also consumers are increasingly demanding that brands align with their moral values. And so it's important for companies to take nice but ultimately meaningless moral stands. Something that's going to get a few people pissed off, generate a controversy, but ultimately just make the brand look pretty good. So the Book of Boba Fett was basically dead in the water for weeks. Obviously we don't have access to the internal numbers, but you can look at like the upvote counts on Reddit, the Google Trends, the Twitter tweet volume, and it was all like trending downwards quite rapidly. No one was really that interested in this show. But then, well, interest in it has spiked up 2 times. One was obviously deepfake Luke Skywalker. Sorry, spoilers. But secondly, or firstly, and what I'm going to talk about now, is the Slave One controversy. If you've not heard about this, Boba Fett is no longer capable of calling his ship Slave One.
My fire spray gunship.
Obviously, in the years since the Disney acquisition, slaves have gone out of style. Now, the first thing to note is that no one cares about this. And I know no one cares about this because when it trended on Twitter, it trended as Slave One. Whereas we all know the actual name is Slave I. Maybe that's a creative decision, you know, Boba Fett isn't feeling quite so edgy anymore, but it does seem a likely executive decision, if only because Fire Spray Gunship is probably a better toy name for children, or maybe because they wanted to get people talking. I mean, obviously this is going to stoke their little Star Wars culture war. Obviously, I think it's impossible that they wouldn't have known that, no matter what reason they made this decision for. They must have done that calculation and decided it was worth it. There's no reason to have that so explicitly in there, but, you know, the result is that it gets this little controversy going, and the vast majority of people are going to go, well, that was a nice gesture. You know, but it's meaningless. It's meaningless. It's not like the Book of Boba Fett is taking a stand against slavery.
No. You can't say no, you're a droid.
I think it's fair to say that Disney consistently makes an effort to politicize and stoke the discourse around their products, while the products themselves are politically neutered in an attempt to please everyone. It maybe seems like a crazy thing to say because the discourse around them is so politicized, but like, you know, The Last Jedi barely passes the Bechdel test. It's like 2 lines of dialogue make it, you know, tip over the edge there. Not that that's a final test of anything, but you know, it's not that progressive of a movie. The Rise of Skywalker, famously the first gay kiss in Star Wars or whatever, but it's like out of focus in the background. Well, like the actual political parallels. So, you know, George Lucas' Star Wars was always political. The original trilogy was a commentary on Vietnam with the evil Galactic Empire as the Americans and the good Rebel Alliance as the Viet Cong. Similarly, the prequel trilogy had the Republic as the George Bush administration fighting against a fake enemy that they'd created. But you try and apply that sort of logic to the new movies, and it's like, well, the First Order is the Americans, and then the corrupt New Republic is the Syrian government, and the good resistance is Islamic State. I mean, it's just meaningless. It doesn't mean anything, right? They're just using the aesthetics of the past. They're not trying to say anything. But repeatedly projected onto these things are these politics that they just don't have. And suddenly, people who easily disagree with everything about the content believe that they're disagreeing with, like, progressive ideology. Actual representation is obviously very good. It helps broaden people's horizons, it moves the culture forward, and obviously the representation that's in this Star Wars content, it is, you know, it's baby steps, it's like 10 years behind everyone else, but it's nice. But tying media bullshit to genuine social issues that it does not represent, is incredibly stupid. We know that the main result of that is bickering online and the creation of bigots out of people who don't like media products, which doesn't help society. But it does help the Disney brand reputation. Just like what we're seeing happen to music, the streaming platforms are driving down the value of their content. The subscription pricing model is designed to not cover the costs. This is where the mid-budget actions and comedies have gone. They haven't moved to streaming, they've been undercut by it to the point that they're no longer financially viable. That area of mid-budget studio experimentation that Star Wars existed in 1977 is gone. You've got your low-budget experimentation, your mid-budget tentpoles, and your unfathomably large budget blockbusters. And all these platforms are doing it on shaky as fuck borrowed money. They're actively trying to price out the competition, buy up the competition, and protect their intellectual property. It's not about making things that people want to see, it's about ensuring dominance and stagnation. And this is kind of early days. The Boba Fett show should not exist. Everyone knows this. The people making it know this, but it has to, because it's a good piece of promotional material. Great name recognition. A good logo to have underneath the Disney Plus logo. And that's it, right? Yes, the actual show is shit, obviously. But that name recognition, if there's one takeaway from this, it's just don't support the streaming services. There are still other options available that are more moral and ethical. For example, just find a kid with hope for the future and just spit in their face. So if you have a Disney Plus subscription, cancel it now. And subscribe to calebgammon.com. Cool, there we go. That wasn't really about Boba Fett, but who cares? It's a bad idea for a show that delivered on its promise of being a bad idea for a show. I've said that before. I think I was quoting myself there. How embarrassing. I'm going to do a full VFX breakdown of my Star Wars edits on the website, since that's something that people have asked for a lot, and we'll see if people actually want it. Proper long form, every shot covered, so if you wanted to know how specific visual effects shots were done, or if you just wanted some long form content, there's one of those going up ideally right now, and then another one to follow pretty soon after. So keep an eye out for that. I accidentally just turned off the projector, so that's going to have to be it for continuity purposes.